The coughing fit seized Katherine Harris's lungs like a vise as she struggled to hang the laundry on the line, her trembling hands barely able to grip the wooden clothespins. The 3-year-old twins, Emma and Elijah, played in the dirt nearby while her oldest, 6-year-old Jacob, watched his mother with worried eyes that had grown too old for his young face. Katherine knew she was getting worse, not better, and with winter approaching Cripple Creek, Colorado in 1882, the outlook was growing as bleak as the gray clouds gathering on the horizon. "Mama," Jacob's small voice pierced through her haze of pain. "You're coughing red again." Katherine quickly wiped the blood from her lips with her handkerchief, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Just a bit of dust, sweetheart. Why don't you take your brother and sister inside? I think we might have a bit of molasses for bread if you're hungry." The truth was they had precious little of anything. Since her husband Thomas had died in the mine collapse 8 months ago, Katherine had been barely keeping them afloat with her sewing work. But now, with this consumption ravaging her body, even threading a needle had become a monumental task. As another coughing fit dropped her to her knees, Katherine didn't notice the tall figure approaching on horseback, dust billowing behind him as he made his way up the winding path to her small cabin. Owen Barrett pulled his hat lower against the autumn wind as he guided his chestnut mare toward the modest homestead. He'd been riding for the Double R Ranch for nearly 5 years, driving cattle and living under the stars. At 30 years old, he was considered something of a loner even among cowboys, preferring the company of his horse and the vast Colorado sky to the raucous saloons, where most of his companions spent their wages. He'd passed this small cabin many times on his rides, occasionally exchanging pleasantries with the man who lived there. Owen had heard about the mine collapse that had taken Thomas Harris's life. The whole town had, but he hadn't realized the widow and her children were still trying to make it on their own, until Reverend Miller had mentioned it at the general store that morning. "Poor woman's got the consumption," the Reverend had said, shaking his head. "3 little ones and nobody to help. She's too proud to ask, but I fear they won't make it through winter without intervention." Owen hadn't planned to intervene personally. He'd simply thought to bring some supplies from the ranch's surplus, and perhaps offer to chop some firewood. But as he approached and saw the slim figure collapse beside the laundry line, a protectiveness he didn't know he possessed surged within him. He dismounted quickly, tying his horse to the fence post before hurrying to the fallen woman. "Madam, are you all right?" Katherine looked up at the stranger, embarrassment flooding her pale cheeks with color. His face was partially obscured by his hat, but she could see a strong jaw covered with a neatly trimmed beard and kind eyes the color of a summer sky. "I'm fine," she insisted, struggling to stand. "Just a bit winded from the work." Owen frowned, noticing the blood-specked handkerchief she clutched in her trembling hand. Without asking permission, he bent down and helped her to her feet, surprised at how little she weighed like a bird with hollow bones. "I'm Owen Barrett," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "I work at the Double R. Let me help you inside, Mrs. Harris." Before Katherine could protest, the cabin door flew open and Jacob appeared, his small face pinched with concern. "Mama," he cried, rushing toward them. "Your mama's just tired," Owen said, his voice calm and steady. "How about you show me where she can rest, young man?" Jacob eyed the tall stranger suspiciously but nodded, leading the way into the cabin. Inside, the twins looked up from where they sat on the floor, their eyes wide with curiosity. The interior was clean but desperately sparse: a small cookstove, a table with 4 mismatched chairs, and through an open door, Owen could see a single bed, and what appeared to be a pallet on the floor where the children likely slept. Owen helped Katherine to the bed, concern deepening as he felt the heat radiating from her body. "You've got fever," he said quietly. "When did you last see the doctor?" "We can't afford Dr. Wilson," she whispered, embarrassed. "I've been taking willow bark tea. It helps some." Owen's jaw tightened as he took in the situation: 3 hungry children, a desperately ill mother, and winter coming fast. He made a decision then that would alter the course of all their lives. "Mrs. Harris," he said firmly, "I'm going to ride back to town and fetch the doctor. Then I'm going to bring some supplies. And," he added, seeing she was about to protest, "I won't hear any arguments about it." Katherine wanted to object, to insist they could manage, but another coughing fit rendered her speechless. Through watering eyes, she saw Owen Barrett take charge, instructing Jacob how to keep her comfortable, telling the twins to be good helpers, promising to return quickly. There was something in his confident manner that made the children trust him immediately. As the tall cowboy disappeared through the door, Katherine closed her eyes, too exhausted to wonder about the stranger's sudden appearance in their lives or what his help might cost them later. For now, she could only surrender to the illness that had been stalking her for months. True to his word, Owen returned before sundown with Dr. Wilson, whose grave expression after examining Katherine confirmed what Owen had feared. The consumption was advanced, and without proper care, she wouldn't survive the winter. "She needs rest, good food, and someone to tend to her and these children," the doctor said quietly as they stepped outside. "I've seen miracles happen with this disease, especially in our mountain air, but not when patients are working themselves to death." Owen nodded, his mind already made up. "I understand." After the doctor left, Owen unloaded his horse, bringing in bundles of supplies: flour, sugar, coffee, bacon, beans, potatoes, and even some hard candy for the children whose eyes grew wide at such treasures. "Mr. Barrett," Katherine began weakly from her bed, "this is too much." "We can't accept—" "You can and you will," Owen interrupted, his tone leaving no room for argument as he hung his coat on a peg by the door. "I've spoken to my boss at the Double R. I've got some time coming to me, and I aim to spend it making sure you and these little ones don't starve." He rolled up his sleeves and surveyed the small kitchen area. "Now, who's hungry for some proper supper?" The children cheered while Katherine watched in amazement as this stranger moved efficiently around her kitchen, somehow finding her meager supply of pots and pans, and setting about creating a meal that soon filled the cabin with mouth-watering aromas. That night, as the children ate their fill of beans, bacon, and biscuits, Katherine tried to make sense of the day's events. Owen Barrett was a mystery, taciturn yet gentle, commanding yet kind to her children. As darkness fell and he settled the little ones for bed with a surprisingly engaging story about a clever horse, Katherine realized she hadn't felt this safe since before Thomas died. "Why are you doing this?" she finally asked when he brought her a cup of tea and more of Dr. Wilson's medicine. Owen considered her question, his blue eyes thoughtful. "My ma died of consumption when I was 10, he said quietly. "There was nobody to help her, or me and my sisters after. I swore if I ever had the chance to prevent that for someone else, I would." His honest answer touched something deep in Katherine's heart. "How long can you stay?" "As long as needed," he replied simply. "I've told Mr. Reynolds at the Double R that I'll be back for spring roundup. Until then, my job is here." Katherine wanted to protest, to insist she couldn't accept such charity, but the relief of having help was overwhelming. "The children," she whispered. "They need so much." "And they'll have it," Owen assured her. "Now rest, Mrs. Harris. Tomorrow's another day." As Katherine drifted to sleep, the sound of Owen quietly moving about the cabin was strangely comforting. For the first time in months, she didn't worry about what would happen if she didn't wake up in the morning. The following days established a routine none of them could have imagined before Owen's arrival. He rose before dawn, stoked the fire, and had coffee brewing before the children stirred. He made breakfast oatmeal with dried apples and cinnamon or flapjacks with molasses, then helped Jacob dress the twins while Katherine rested. When the children were settled with their simple toys or books, Owen tackled the cabin's most pressing needs. He patched the leaky roof, repaired the broken fence, chopped enough firewood to last months, and even constructed a proper bedstead for the children in the small side room. But it was in the kitchen where Owen truly surprised them all. This rough-handed cowboy revealed an unexpected talent for cooking that transformed their meager supplies into meals that brought color back to Katherine's cheeks and delighted laughter from the children. "Where did you learn to cook like this?" Katherine asked one evening after the children had gone to bed, as Owen served her a bowl of rich stew. "On the trail," he explained, taking a seat across from her at the small table. "Cowboys draw straws for who cooks. I got tired of eating burnt beans, so I learned to do better. Found I had a knack for it." Katherine smiled, noticing how the firelight caught the golden strands in his beard. "The children adore your cooking. I haven't seen them eat so well since." She trailed off, the memory of Thomas painful even after all these months. "They're good kids," Owen said simply. "Smart, too. Jacob's got away with figures that could make him a banker someday." "He gets that from his father," Katherine said softly. "Thomas always had a head for numbers." Owen nodded, respecting her need to speak of her late husband. "Tell me about him," he encouraged, "if you'd like to." So Katherine found herself talking about Thomas, how they'd met when he came to Colorado from Boston seeking his fortune in silver, how he'd wooed her with poetry and promises, how devoted he'd been to the children. Owen listened attentively, asking questions that showed genuine interest rather than mere politeness. "He sounds like a good man," Owen said when she finished. "You were blessed to have those years together." "Yes," Katherine agreed, surprised to find the ache in her heart slightly dulled by sharing these memories. "Though I never imagined being left alone like this." "You're not alone anymore," Owen said simply, and rose to clear their bowls. Katherine watched him move about her small kitchen with the same confidence he likely showed on horseback. There was something comforting about his presence, solid and dependable like the mountains themselves. She found herself wondering what his life was like when he wasn't rescuing desperate widows and their children. "You have family somewhere, Mr. Barrett?" she asked. "Owen," he corrected gently. "After a man's cooked your meals for 2 weeks, seems right you'd use his given name." Katherine smiled, nodding her agreement. "Owen, then." "My sisters are both married, living in Nebraska," he answered her question. "I visit when I can, which isn't often enough. No wife, no children." He glanced at her, a hint of self-deprecation in his smile. "Most women aren't keen on marrying a man who spends half his life in a saddle, sleeping under stars." "It would take a special kind of woman," Katherine agreed, finding herself curious about what kind of woman might catch Owen Barrett's eye. As November deepened toward December, Katherine's health improved slowly but steadily. Dr. Wilson, who now accepted payment in the form of Owen's exquisite sourdough bread, expressed cautious optimism during his weekly visits. "Your lungs sound clearer," he told Katherine during one examination. "The rest and good food are working wonders. Mr. Barrett's care has been exactly what you needed." Katherine couldn't disagree. Owen had transformed their lives in ways that went beyond physical necessities. He taught Jacob to whittle, showing infinite patience as the boy's small hands struggled with the knife. He braided Emma's hair each morning with surprising dexterity, claiming he'd learned on his horse's mane. He carried Elijah on his shoulders during walks through the surrounding woods, teaching the boy the names of trees and tracks of animals. And each night, without fail, he prepared meals that brought them together around the table like a real family. The first snowfall came early that year, blanketing the cabin and surrounding forest in pristine white. Katherine woke to the delighted squeals of her children and the rich aroma of cinnamon and apples. Wrapping her shawl around her shoulders, she emerged from her bedroom to find Owen helping the twins into their warmest clothes while a special breakfast baked in the oven. "Snow day means snow treats," he explained with a wink when he saw her. "My ma always made apple cake when the first snow fell." Later, bundled in every layer they owned, Katherine sat on the porch watching Owen teach her children to build a snowman. Her chest still ached when she laughed too hard, but the terrible coughing fits had become less frequent. As she watched Owen lift Emma to place a carrot nose on their creation, Katherine felt something shift inside her, a warmth that had nothing to do with her illness, and everything to do with the man who had entered their lives like an answer to an unspoken prayer. That evening, after the children had fallen asleep exhausted from their snowy adventures, Katherine found Owen mending Jacob's worn boots by the fire. "You didn't have to do that," she said softly, taking a seat in the rocking chair across from him. Owen looked up, his hands continuing their skilled work. "Boy needs sturdy boots for winter." "Owen," Katherine said hesitantly, "I don't know how I'll ever repay you for all you've done." His hand stilled and he met her gaze directly. "I'm not looking to be repaid, Katherine." It was the first time he'd used her given name, and something about the way it sounded in his deep voice made her heart flutter. "Then why?" she pressed. "Why give up months of your life for strangers?" Owen set the boot aside and leaned forward, his forearms resting on his knees. "You stopped being strangers to me the moment Jacob showed me to your bedroom that first day," he said simply. "I can't explain it better than that." The honesty in his blue eyes made Katherine's breath catch. There was something unspoken between them, something growing in the quiet evenings after the children slept, in the shared smiles over the antics of the twins, in the way their hands sometimes brushed when passing dishes at the table. But Katherine wasn't ready to name it. Not yet. The ghost of Thomas still lingered in the cabin they had built together, and her heart, though healing, still carried the scars of his loss. As if sensing her thoughts, Owen picked up Jacob's boot again. "Some things can't be rushed," he said quietly. "Leather needs time to soften, stitches need time to hold. Everything in its season." Katherine nodded, grateful for his understanding. "Thank you," she whispered, and they sat in companionable silence as the fire crackled between them. December brought Christmas preparations that Owen approached with the same determination he brought to everything. He disappeared one morning and returned with a small pine tree that delighted the children. Under his guidance, they created ornaments from pine cones, bits of colored paper, and strips of fabric. Katherine contributed by sewing tiny stockings from scraps of red flannel. "Christmas was always special at our house," Owen explained as he helped Emma string berries for the tree. "My pa made sure of it even in lean years." "Is your father still living?" Katherine asked, realizing how little she knew about Owen's past. A shadow crossed his face. "No, he died in the war Antietam. I was 8. Katherine reached out impulsively and touched his arm. "I'm sorry." Owen covered her hand with his own briefly. "It was a long time ago, but it's why I try to make memories for children whenever I can. Never know how many Christmases you'll have together." On Christmas Eve, after a dinner of roast rabbit and potatoes, Owen surprised them all by producing small gifts: a wooden horse he'd carved for Elijah, a rag doll with real yarn hair for Emma, and for Jacob, a small notebook with a pencil. "For your figures," Owen explained as the boy ran his fingers reverently over the blank pages. A banker needs to keep good records. For Katherine, he'd found a beautiful blue wool shawl in town. "To keep you warm on the porch," he said quietly as she wrapped it around her shoulders, marveling at its softness. "I didn't get you anything," she said, embarrassed. Owen smiled, the firelight making his eyes appear even bluer. "You've given me a home for Christmas. That's gift enough." Later that night, after Katherine had tucked the excited children into bed with promises that morning would come faster if they slept, she found Owen on the porch, smoking his pipe and gazing at the star-filled sky. "Mind some company?" she asked, wrapping her new shawl tighter against the cold. Owen immediately stood, offering her his chair. "Not at all. It's beautiful tonight," Katherine said, looking up at the countless stars sparkling against the velvet blackness. "One of the reasons I became a cowboy," Owen admitted. "Sleeping under that sky makes a man feel both small and important all at once." Katherine studied his profile, strong and steady in the moonlight. "Do you miss it? The trail, I mean." Owen considered the question. "I miss parts of it," he said honestly. "The freedom, the simplicity, but—" He glanced toward the cabin where the children slept. "There are things about this life I never knew I wanted until now." His words hung in the cold air between them, filled with meaning neither was quite ready to articulate. "Merry Christmas, Owen," Katherine said softly. "Merry Christmas, Katherine," he replied, and if his gaze lingered on her face a moment longer than necessary, neither mentioned it. Christmas morning brought squeals of delight from the children, and a special breakfast of cinnamon rolls that Owen had risen before dawn to prepare. Katherine watched him with her children, patient, kind, firm when needed, and realized with startling clarity that she was falling in love with this quiet cowboy, who had saved them in more ways than he knew. The thought both thrilled and terrified her. Thomas had been gone less than a year. Was it disloyal to feel this way so soon? And what of Owen? Was his kindness merely that, or did he harbor deeper feelings? The uncertainty kept her silent, though sometimes she caught him watching her with an expression that made her wonder. January brought bitter cold and a blizzard that kept them housebound for 3 days. Owen kept the children entertained with stories of cattle drives and wild horses, while teaching them to play checkers with a board he fashioned from a piece of wood and buttons for pieces. Katherine, feeling stronger than she had in months, helped by reading to them from the few books they owned and teaching Emma to stitch simple patterns. The close quarters heightened Katherine's awareness of Owen, his scent of leather and pine, the low rumble of his laugh when Elijah said something precocious, the gentleness of his large hands as he braided Emma's hair. Each night he slept on a pallet by the fire, refusing Katherine's offers to trade places occasionally. "A man who slept on hard ground half his life doesn't need a soft bed," he insisted, though Katherine suspected his back troubled him more than he admitted on cold mornings. When the blizzard finally subsided, Owen spent hours digging paths around the cabin and to the small barn where he kept his horse and the milk cow he'd purchased just before Christmas. The sight of him working tirelessly in the deep snow, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air, stirred something in Katherine that she hadn't felt since Thomas's early courtship, a physical awareness that heated her cheeks despite the cold. That evening, Katherine sat darning socks while Owen taught Jacob to play a simple tune on the harmonica he'd found in his saddlebags. The twins were already asleep, exhausted from playing in the snow tunnels Owen had created for them. "You're good with them," Katherine said softly as Jacob finally succeeded in producing a recognizable melody. Owen smiled, ruffling the boy's hair. "They make it easy. Smart kids, all 3. Jacob beamed at the praise before a yawn overtook him. "Can we practice more tomorrow, Mr. Barrett?" "Count on it, partner," Owen assured him. "Now I reckon it's bedtime for musicians." After Jacob had been tucked in beside his siblings, Katherine returned to find Owen staring thoughtfully into the fire, his expression unreadable. "Penny for your thoughts," she said, taking her usual chair. Owen glanced up, a small smile softening his features. "Just thinking about time." "Time," he nodded, poking at the fire with an iron rod. "Spring roundup will be here before we know it." The reminder that Owen's stay was temporary struck Katherine like a physical blow. Somehow, in the domestic rhythm they'd established, she'd allowed herself to forget that he would eventually return to his real life. "The double R will be needing you back," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Yes," Owen agreed, still gazing into the flames. "But I've been thinking." Katherine held her breath, afraid to hope. "I've put aside some money over the years," he continued slowly. "Not a fortune, but enough to maybe buy a small place, something like this." His eyes finally met hers, uncertainty in their blue depths. "If I had a reason to stay in one place." Katherine's heart hammered in her chest. "Are you asking me something, Owen?" He set the fire iron aside and moved to kneel before her chair, taking her hands in his. "I'm not good with fancy words, Katherine. I'm just a cowboy who never thought much beyond the next season. But these months with you and the children," he paused, seeming to search for the right words. "They've shown me what I've been missing, what I want." Katherine found herself trembling, not from illness but from the intensity of emotions flooding through her. "Thomas was a good man," Owen continued, "and I would never try to replace him in your heart or the children's memories. But I think maybe there's room for me too, if you'd be willing." Tears filled Katherine's eyes as she gazed at this man who had brought healing and hope back into their lives. "The children would be heartbroken if you left," she whispered. "And you?" Owen asked, his voice rough with emotion. Katherine freed one hand to touch his bearded cheek. "I would be heartbroken too." Owen's eyes brightened. "Then marry me, Katherine Harris. Let me care for you and those children properly, not as a guest in your home but as a husband and father." The proposal, simple and heartfelt, was everything Katherine hadn't known she needed. "Your certain 3 children is a lot to take on." "I've never been more certain of anything," Owen assured her, his hands tightening around hers. "I love those children as if they were my own. And I love you, Katherine. I think I have since that first day when you tried to tell me you were fine even though you could hardly stand." Katherine laughed softly through her tears. "I was so stubborn. Still are," Owen teased gently. "You haven't answered my question." Katherine leaned forward until their foreheads touched. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you, Owen Barrett." The kiss that followed was tender and reverent, a promise of the life they would build together. When they finally parted, Owen's smile was brighter than Katherine had ever seen it. "When?" he asked, still holding her hands. "Spring," she decided. "When the wildflowers bloom." "It seems right, a new beginning." Owen nodded his agreement. "Spring it is. And in the meantime, I'll continue sleeping by this fire, though it'll be considerably harder now that I know what's waiting." Katherine blushed, but her smile was confident. "Some things are worth waiting for." The news of their engagement delighted the children. Jacob, who had grown attached to Owen despite his initial wariness, was especially pleased. "Does this mean you're not leaving?" he asked over breakfast the next morning. "It means I'm staying for good," Owen confirmed. "If that's all right with you." Jacob considered this seriously before nodding. "You make the best flapjacks, and Mama smiles more when you're here." Owen laughed, ruffling the boy's hair. "Smart boy, those are 2 fine reasons." Emma, who at 3 had a more limited understanding, simply asked, "Will you be our papa now?" Owen glanced at Katherine, who nodded her permission. "Yes, little miss, if you'll have me." Emma climbed into his lap immediately, wrapping her small arms around his neck. "I will have you," she declared solemnly, mimicking his formal phrasing. Elijah, not to be outdone, scrambled to join his sister. "Me too." Katherine watched the scene with a heart so full it threatened to overflow. Thomas would always be the children's father, but Owen was offering them something precious, a future with a man who genuinely loved them, who had chosen them. The remainder of winter passed in a blur of domestic contentment and growing anticipation. Katherine's health continued to improve, though Dr. Wilson warned that the consumption could return if she overexerted herself. "Keep doing what you're doing," he advised during a February visit. "The mountain air and rest are the best medicine, and clearly," he added with a knowing smile toward Owen, "happiness agrees with you." Owen took his responsibility as future husband and father seriously, making plans and preparations with characteristic thoroughness. He rode to town once a week for supplies and to send telegrams to his sisters in Nebraska, inviting them to the spring wedding. He also began improvements to the cabin, adding a lean-to that would serve as a proper bedroom for the children once he and Katherine were married. Katherine, for her part, felt stronger with each passing day. She gradually resumed some of her sewing work, though Owen insisted she not overtax herself. Together they established a rhythm that felt natural and right, sharing cooking duties, caring for the children, discussing plans for their future together. In the evenings, after the children were asleep, they would sit before the fire and talk about their childhoods, their hopes, their fears. Katherine learned that beneath Owen's quiet confidence lay a depth of thought and feeling that continually surprised her. "I always figured I'd die with my boots on," he admitted one night. "Riding the range, living rough. Never imagined wanting more until I met you and those little ones." Katherine reached for his hand. "Are you sure you won't miss that life, the freedom of it?" Owen interlaced his fingers with hers. "Freedom's different things to different men. For some, it's the open trail. For me now, it's the choice to stay instead of go to build something lasting." He smiled, the firelight dancing in his eyes. "Besides, I reckon I can still ride out now and then when the wanderlust hits, just not for months at a time." "I'd never want to clip your wings," Katherine assured him. "A man needs his own pursuits." "And you?" Owen asked. "What do you need, Katherine Harris?" She considered the question thoughtfully. "Security for my children, work that matters. And," she added softly, "someone to share it all with, the joys and sorrows both." Owen lifted their joined hands to his lips. "Those seem like things we can manage together." As winter reluctantly yielded to spring, the mountains around Cripple Creek burst into color: purple lupine, golden columbine, and scarlet paintbrush dotting the meadows. Katherine, who had spent much of the winter indoors, reveled in walks with Owen and the children, her strength returning more fully with each passing day. "I never thought I'd see another spring," she confessed to Owen as they stood on a hilltop overlooking a valley awash with wildflowers. The children were gathering blossoms nearby, their laughter carrying on the gentle breeze. Owen's arm tightened around her waist. "I'm mighty glad you did." Katherine leaned into his solid warmth, still amazed at how natural it felt to be held by him. "It's a miracle really you're coming when you did." "Not a miracle," Owen corrected gently. "Just a man following his heart, even if he didn't realize that's what he was doing at the time." Their wedding took place on the first Saturday in May, with Reverend Miller officiating in the small church in Cripple Creek. Owen's sisters traveled from Nebraska, bringing handmade quilts and preserves as wedding gifts. The townspeople, who had watched the romance unfold with interest and approval, filled the church to capacity. Katherine wore a simple dress of pale blue silk, a gift from Owen that had arrived mysteriously from Denver with wildflowers in her hair. Jacob proudly escorted his mother down the aisle, while Emma scattered flower petals and Elijah carried the rings on a small cushion, his face solemn with the responsibility. Owen, standing at the altar in a new suit, his beard trimmed and his usually wild hair tamed, looked at Katherine with such love that tears sprang to her eyes. As they exchanged vows, promising to love and cherish each other through all of life's seasons, Katherine felt the last shadows of grief lifting from her heart. Thomas would always be a part of her, but Owen had brought her back to life when she had resigned herself to death. The celebration afterward was joyous, but simple, a gathering at their cabin with food contributed by neighbors and music provided by local miners who doubled as fiddlers. Owen's sisters fussed over the children, declaring them the most beautiful nieces and nephew in Colorado, while Katherine found herself welcomed warmly into Owen's small family. "He's been writing about you for months," Olivia, the older sister, confided. "We've never seen him so settled or happy." "I was afraid at first," Katherine admitted, "that I was being disloyal to Thomas, that it was too soon." Olivia patted her hand. "The heart knows its own timing, and Owen, he's the best of men. Our father would have been so proud to see the man he's become." As twilight descended, the guests gradually departed, leaving the new family alone in their home. The children, exhausted from excitement, fell asleep almost immediately, leaving Owen and Katherine to finally share their first moments of privacy as husband and wife. Standing in their bedroom, no longer just Katherine's, but theirs, Owen gently removed the flowers from her hair, his touch reverent. "You are so beautiful," he whispered. "Sometimes I still can't believe you chose me." Katherine reached up to touch his face, memorizing the contours she had come to love. "You chose us first," she reminded him, "when we needed you most." Owen caught her hand and kissed her palm. "Best decision I ever made." As he drew her into his arms, Katherine marveled at how life could change so completely in the span of months, how despair could transform into hope, strangers into family, and a lonely cabin into a true home. Later, as they lay entwined in the darkness, Katherine rested her head on Owen's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "What happens now?" she asked softly. Owen's hand traced lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "Now we live, Owen Barrett. We raise those children, maybe add a few more if you're willing. We build something good together." "I'd like that," Katherine murmured, already drifting toward sleep, secure in his embrace. All of it. Summer brought abundant growth to their small homestead. Owen, with help from friends from the Double R, expanded their garden and built a proper chicken coop. He still rode out occasionally to help with ranch work, earning extra money while maintaining the connections that were important to him. Katherine flourished in her role as wife and mother, her health now fully restored. With Owen's encouragement, she expanded her sewing business, creating fine dresses and shirts that soon had a waiting list of customers from Cripple Creek and beyond. The children blossomed under the love and security their new family provided. Jacob began school in the fall, proudly carrying the lunch pail Owen had made him and returning home each day bursting with new knowledge to share. The twins, now 4, helped with simple chores and followed Owen adoringly around the property, helping with whatever project he undertook. In October, Katherine discovered she was expecting a child, news that brought tears of joy to Owen's eyes when she told him. "Are you happy?" she asked, though his expression left little doubt. "Beyond words," he assured her, gathering her close. "A baby, our baby." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the winter, with Owen hovering protectively, ensuring Katherine rested and ate well. He cooked every meal with special attention to nutrition, researching foods that would strengthen both mother and growing child. "You don't have to wait on me," Katherine protested one evening as he insisted on bringing her tea while she sewed by the fire. "I'm with child, not invalid." Owen smiled, unrepentant. "Humor me. I missed this part with the others." His reference to Katherine's children as the others rather than your children touched her deeply. From the beginning, Owen had embraced Jacob, Emma, and Elijah as his own, never distinguishing between them and the child they were now expecting. Spring arrived again, marking a year since their wedding and nearly 18 months since Owen had first ridden up to their cabin. The wildflowers were just beginning to carpet the meadows when Katherine went into labor one calm April morning. Owen sent Jacob to fetch the midwife, before settling Katherine comfortably in their bedroom. The children were dispatched to a neighbor's house, wide-eyed with excitement at the prospect of a new brother or sister. "I'm not leaving you," Owen said firmly when the midwife arrived, and suggested he wait outside as was customary. Katherine, already breathing through contractions, gripped his hand gratefully. "Good, because I need you here." The labor was long but uncomplicated, and as dawn broke the following day, their son entered the world with a lusty cry that immediately brought tears to Owen's eyes. "He's perfect," Owen whispered, cradling the infant while the midwife tended to Katherine. "Look what we made, Katherine." Katherine smiled tiredly, reaching for the bundle. "He has your chin, I think." The baby had a shock of dark hair and eyes that, when they briefly opened, showed hints of Owen's blue. They named him Samuel Thomas Barrett Samuel, for Owen's father and Thomas, in honor of the man who had given Katherine her first 3 children. When Jacob, Emma, and Elijah were brought home to meet their new brother, their reactions ranged from awe to healthy curiosity. Jacob, now 7, approached the cradle solemnly. "I'll help you teach him things," he promised Owen. "Like you taught me." Owen rested his hand on the boy's shoulder. "I'm counting on it, son." Emma wanted to know if Samuel could play dolls yet, while Elijah was primarily concerned with whether the baby liked horses as much as he did. "He's just a baby," Emma told her twin with all the wisdom of her 4 years. "He doesn't know about horses yet. We have to teach him everything." Owen caught Katherine's eye across the room, both of them suppressing laughter at the children's earnest conversations. That evening, with Samuel sleeping peacefully in his cradle and the other children finally in bed after much excitement, Owen and Katherine sat together on the porch, enjoying the mild spring air. "Are you happy, Mrs. Barrett?" Owen asked, his arm around her shoulders. Katherine leaned into him, contentment filling her completely. "Happier than I ever thought possible after Thomas died," she admitted. "You brought life back to us, Owen, not just by caring for us when I was ill, but by showing us there could be joy again." Owen kissed her temple gently. "You all saved me too, you know. Gave me roots, purpose beyond the next horizon." As they sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky, Katherine reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. From the desperate illness that had nearly claimed her life to the unexpected arrival of a quiet cowboy who cooked meals and mended hearts with equal skill, their story had unfolded in ways she could never have imagined. "What are you thinking?" Owen asked, noticing her contemplative expression. Katherine smiled, looking up at the man who had become the center of their family's world. "I was thinking about beginnings, how sometimes they come disguised as endings. When I was at my lowest, thinking only of what would happen to my children after I was gone, you appeared. And now look at us." Owen's arms tightened around her. Best kind of beginning there is the unexpected kind. Inside their warm cabin, their newborn son sighed in his sleep, while 3 other children dreamed beneath quilts Owen's sisters had made. The cook stove that had produced countless nourishing meals stood ready for breakfast preparations that would begin with dawn's first light. Outside, the mountains stood sentinel against the star-filled sky, unchanging yet ever-changing with the seasons, much like love itself. "Thank you," Katherine whispered, "for every meal you cooked, for every story you told the children, for every moment you stayed when you could have gone." Owen smiled, the lines around his eyes crinkling in the way she had come to adore. "My pleasure, Mrs. Barrett. And I plan to keep cooking those meals for many years to come." "Promise?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "Promise," Owen replied, sealing his vow with a kiss as the Colorado night wrapped around them like a blessing. 5 years later, Katherine stood on the porch of their expanded home, watching Owen teaching their youngest daughter, 2-year-old Rose, to feed the chickens. Samuel, now 5, followed his father's every move with adoration, while the older children helped with the more substantial chores around the thriving homestead. What had once been a struggling widow's cabin had transformed into a prosperous small ranch. Owen had purchased adjacent land and built up a respectable herd of cattle, while Katherine's sewing business had grown into a small shop in town where she worked 3 days a week, creating fashions that were sought after throughout the county. The consumption that had nearly taken her life had never returned, though Katherine never forgot how close she had come to leaving her children motherless. That awareness made each day precious, each moment with her family a gift to be treasured. As she watched Owen swing Rose onto his shoulders, his laugh mingling with the little girl's delighted giggles, Katherine felt the familiar rush of love that still surprised her with its intensity. The quiet cowboy who had ridden into their lives when they needed him most had become the foundation upon which their happiness was built, steady, dependable, and endlessly loving. Owen looked up and caught her watching, his smile warming his blue eyes. Even after all these years, that smile could still make Katherine's heart skip a beat. "Dinner almost ready," he called. "These ranch hands are working up an appetite." "Just about," Katherine replied, returning his smile. "I made your favorite stew." "Not as good as yours," she had told him countless times over the years. But Owen insisted her cooking had surpassed his own, though he still made breakfast most mornings, claiming it was his special talent. Later, as they sat around the large table Owen had built when their family expanded, Katherine looked at the faces gathered there. Jacob, now 12, and showing signs of the handsome man he would become. The twins, 9 and full of energy and ideas. Samuel, thoughtful like his father. And little Rose, with Katherine's auburn hair and Owen's blue eyes. At the head of the table sat Owen, who caught her gaze and winked, still able to make her blush after all these years. This was the life she had nearly missed, the future that had almost been stolen by illness and fate. Instead, a cowboy with gentle hands and a talent for cooking had ridden into their lives, bringing healing and hope when they needed it most. As Owen led the family in their customary evening prayer of thanks, Katherine added her own silent gratitude for second chances, unexpected love, and the countless meals that had nourished not just their bodies, but their souls on the journey from despair to joy. When everyone had been served and the comfortable chaos of family dinner was underway, Owen leaned over to whisper in Katherine's ear, "Still glad you married the cook?" Katherine's answer was in her eyes as she met his gaze, a love deepened by years of shared joys and sorrows, trials and triumphs. "Every single day," she whispered back. "Best decision I ever made." And as their children's laughter filled the home they had built together, Katherine knew with absolute certainty that what had begun as an act of kindness, a cowboy moving in to cook meals for a sick woman, and her children, had transformed into the greatest love story she could have imagined. not a fairy tale of perfect people, but a real-life romance of two hearts finding each other when they least expected it and building a life that was better together than either could have created alone.